This is the story of something that happened a few years ago in a small town near the edge of the forest. I am going to tell you this story exactly how it was told to me, and once you hear it, I promise you'll never look at dogs the same way again. It all started with a woman named Claire. She had just moved into an old countryside house with her two dogs, Max, a loyal German shepherd, and Daisy, a clever little beagle. Claire loved peace and quiet, and this house gave her exactly that. No neighbors nearby, just trees, birds, and the sound of wind blowing through the grass. But here's where it starts getting strange. The first night, Claire heard tapping on her window. Not loud, just soft, like fingernails. Tap, tap, tap. She thought it was just a branch, maybe the wind. But when she went outside the next morning, there were no branches near the window. And there were small marks on the glass, like fingerprints, but too long and thin to be human. She brushed it off. Maybe kids messing around, maybe something else, but her dogs were acting weird. Max kept growling at the walls. Daisy refused to go near the back door. They weren't like this before. On the third night, Claire woke up around 2 a.m. because Max was barking like crazy. Daisy was whimpering, hiding under the bed. Max stood at the bedroom door, hackles raised, teeth bared. Claire got up and followed him downstairs. What she saw chilled her to the bone. The back door was wide open, and muddy footprints led into the house. But these weren't normal footprints, they were three-toed, sharp and wet, like something had walked straight out of a nightmare. Claire froze. Her body wouldn't move. Her mind told her to run, to scream, to do something. But then, Max leapt forward, barking louder than ever. Daisy came running behind him, growling now too. Claire finally snapped out of it, grabbed her phone, and called the police. They said it would take at least 20 minutes to arrive, and that's when the lights went out. The whole house plunged into darkness. The only sounds were the heavy breathing of the dogs and Claire's heartbeat pounding in her ears. Then, the creaking started. Creak, creak. Upstairs, something was in her house. Claire didn't wait. She grabbed a flashlight, turned it on, and followed the dogs upstairs. Max led the way, every muscle in his body ready to attack. Daisy stayed close behind Claire, her small frame trembling, but she didn't run. They reached the hallway. The door to the guest room was open. Claire slowly stepped forward, holding her breath. The light from the flashlight shook in her hands. That's when they saw it. A creature. Pale skin, long arms, no eyes, but it moved like it could see everything. It was crouched in the corner, making this clicking noise like it was tasting the air. The moment the light hit it, it shrieked and rushed toward Claire, but Max jumped in between them. He bit down hard on the thing's leg, holding it back. The creature screamed, twisted, and thrashed, but Max didn't let go. Daisy, without fear, ran in and bit its arm. Claire stumbled back, heart thudding as her dogs fought to keep the creature away from her. Then something amazing happened. As the creature tried to escape, it turned toward the stairs. Claire heard another sound, howling, from outside. Dozens of dogs, wild dogs from the forest, as if they had heard the call, as if they knew something terrible was happening. They charged into the house one by one. Large, small, all shapes and breeds. It was like an army. The creature tried to run, but it was surrounded. Barking filled the house. Teeth snapped, fur flew, and that pale thing shrieked like nothing Claire had ever heard before. Then it jumped out the window and disappeared into the woods. chased by the pack of dogs. The silence afterward was heavy. Claire sat down on the floor, shaking, trying to believe what she just saw. Max came to her, bleeding a little but still standing tall. Daisy curled up beside her, tail wagging softly like she knew everything was okay now. When the police arrived, they found the house scratched, broken, with claw marks on the walls, but no sign of the creature. The officer didn't say much. He looked scared, actually. One of them even whispered, "It happened again." That's when Claire learned she wasn't the first. Years ago, something had come out of the woods near that same spot. People had disappeared. One family never found, but the dogs always knew. They barked before it came. They chased it when humans couldn't. Claire moved out after that. She couldn't stay, not after what she saw. But she never forgot. Max and Daisy. They had saved her life that night. Not just them, but all the dogs that came from the forest like some secret force of nature. Guardians that didn't wear armor or carry weapons but had teeth, courage, and heart. You see, we always think we protect our pets. We feed them, train them, keep them safe. But sometimes, they're the ones protecting us. So next time your dog barks at nothing or stares at the window in the middle of the night, don't be so quick to hush them. Maybe they see something you don't. Maybe, just maybe, they're standing between you and something dark, something waiting in the shadows. That's the story I wanted to tell you. And trust me, once you've heard it, you'll never feel alone when you're with a dog again, because they see, and sometimes they save the day. This is the story of something strange that happened in a quiet town called Maple Ridge. I'm going to tell you about a night that no one there will ever forget. A night when everything changed. So sit back, because this is one of those stories that you won't want to miss. It all started with a man named Jason Carter. He was a regular guy, nothing too special, just a man with a simple job at the local diner. He worked the night shift, mostly serving coffee and sandwiches to truck drivers, late-night travelers, and the occasional drunk from the bar down the street. The diner wasn't anything fancy, but Jason liked it that way. He liked the quiet, the calm, and the routine of it all. But that night, well, that night was different. It was just after midnight when the first odd thing happened. A man walked into the diner. Now that wasn't strange by itself. People wandered in at all hours of the night. But this man, something was off about him. He was tall, with dark, almost black hair that was neatly combed. He wore a dark overcoat even though it wasn't cold outside. His eyes were the strangest part. They were pale, like they hadn't seen the sun in years, and when he looked at you, it felt like he was staring right through you. Jason noticed him immediately. The man sat down at the counter, staring straight ahead, not even looking at the menu. Jason walked over, trying to keep his cool. "Can I get you something to drink?" Jason asked, his voice a little shaky. There was something in the air, something strange, but Jason couldn't put his finger on it. The man didn't reply at first. He just kept staring straight ahead. Finally, he turned his head and looked at Jason. His gaze felt cold, like the wind on the deepest night of winter. "I'll have coffee," the man said in a low, steady voice. "Black. No sugar." Jason quickly poured the coffee and set it in front of him. The man didn't say another word. He just sat there sipping his coffee slowly, his eyes fixed on the door. Jason had to admit, it made him uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. He turned back to the kitchen, shaking off the weird feeling in his stomach. About an hour later, the diner was almost empty, save for the strange man and a couple of truck drivers. Jason was wiping down the counter when the man stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out into the night. The air felt thick, and Jason felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He tried to shake it off. After all, it was just the middle of the night, and his mind was probably playing tricks on him. But then the man turned, looked at him once more, and said something that made Jason's blood run cold. "I know what happened to your sister." Jason froze. He had no idea who this man was. How could he know anything about his sister? "Excuse me?" Jason asked, his voice tight. The man's eyes never left his. He didn't smile, but there was something about the way he said it. Something that made Jason's heart skip a beat. "Your sister, Emily, wasn't it?" the man said. "She disappeared 3 years ago. You've been searching for her ever since, haven't you?" Jason felt his legs go weak. His sister, Emily, she had gone missing 3 years ago. Jason had searched for her, asked everyone in town, put up posters, called the police, but no one had ever found a trace of her. The case had gone cold. Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice shaking now. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the window and stared out at the dark night. "You'll find her," he said, "but not the way you think." Jason was about to speak again, but before he could, the door of the diner opened, and a woman walked in. She was dressed in a simple coat, her face pale, her hair messy like she had just woken up. She looked around the diner, and then her eyes met Jason's. "Jason?" she called softly. Jason's heart stopped. He knew this woman. It was Emily, his sister. He rushed toward her, nearly knocking over a chair in the process. "Emily, is it really you?" But as he reached out for her, the woman took a step back. "Jason, I don't know you. I'm sorry. I think you're mistaken." Jason froze in place, his hand still outstretched. What are you talking about?" His mind was racing. His sister, the one he had been searching for all this time, was standing right in front of him. But she didn't remember him. She didn't recognize him at all. The man at the window turned around, his face expressionless. "It's not her," he said quietly. "At least not the way you remember." Jason felt a cold shiver run through his body. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes glinted in the dim light. "You've been chasing a ghost, Jason. Your sister, she's not alive. Not anymore." Jason's world spun. No, that's not possible. I saw her in the news. I saw her face on the posters. She disappeared. She has to be alive." The man shook his head. "You've been chasing an illusion. The truth is, your sister died that night. She died in the woods just beyond the town, and what you've been seeing since then is something else. Something not human." Jason didn't know what to say. He looked back at Emily, the woman who looked exactly like his sister, but something in her eyes told him that this wasn't the real Emily. This was something else. Suddenly, Emily's face shifted. Her eyes went blank, and her skin grew pale. Her form started to blur, like a mirage in the desert. And before Jason could even react, she vanished into thin air, leaving only the cold, empty air behind her. The man at the window turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he gave Jason one last piece of advice. "You'll never find her, but you will find the truth. Be careful where you look. Some things are better left hidden." With that, the door swung open and closed, leaving Jason alone in the diner. He stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to understand the terrible, horrifying truth that had just been revealed to him. The truth about his sister, and the truth about the man who had come to deliver it. Jason Carter never went back to the diner again. He couldn't. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face, and the truth that was far worse than he could have ever imagined. This is the story of a quiet town called Ashford, where nothing ever really happened, or so everyone thought. But sometimes, when you least expect it, something terrible can slip through the cracks of an otherwise peaceful life. And that's exactly what happened to a young woman named Sarah Bennett. Sarah had lived in Ashford her whole life. She grew up in a small house at the edge of town, where the trees whispered secrets to those who listened carefully. It wasn't the most exciting place to be, but Sarah didn't mind. She worked as a librarian at the local library and spent her days surrounded by books. The smell of old paper and the quiet hum of pages turning was more than enough to keep her happy. It was a calm life, and Sarah liked it that way. But everything changed one chilly evening in October. It started when Sarah was closing the library for the night. The last few patrons had left. The streets outside were empty, and the moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the town. Sarah was gathering her things when she heard a strange noise coming from the back of the library. It was a soft, scraping sound, like something was dragging across the floor. At first, she thought it might just be the wind, or maybe the old building settling, but the sound continued. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Curiosity got the better of her. Sarah walked toward the back hallway, where the noise seemed to be coming from. As she turned the corner, she froze. There, standing in the doorway of the storage room, was a man. He was tall, with messy black hair and a dark coat that didn't belong to anyone she knew. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes glowed an eerie shade of yellow. He didn't say anything. He just stared at Sarah, unmoving. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't recognize him, and there was something unsettling about the way he was standing there. It wasn't normal. She knew that much. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man didn't respond. Instead, he stepped forward, his footfall so soft that Sarah barely heard it. As he moved closer, Sarah noticed that his skin was unnaturally cold, like he hadn't been alive for a long time. She took a step back, instinctively reaching for the phone in her pocket, but it wasn't there. Before she could react, the man spoke, his voice a low whisper that sent chills down her spine. "You shouldn't be here." His words were strange, almost as if he didn't understand why she was in the library at all. Sarah's heart raced as she took another step back, feeling the wall press against her shoulder. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Now!" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached out a hand, his fingers long and pale, and Sarah felt a sudden, intense cold radiate from him. It was as if the room itself had dropped in temperature, the air growing thick and heavy. Before Sarah could react, the man's hand shot forward and gripped her wrist tightly. His fingers felt like ice against her skin. A wave of panic surged through her, and she struggled to pull away, but his grip was unrelenting. "Let go of me," she shouted, her voice breaking. The man's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, it felt like everything around Sarah had stopped. Time seemed to freeze, the air thick with an eerie silence. Then, as if snapping out of a trance, Sarah managed to break free from his grasp. She ran toward the front door, her footsteps echoing through the darkened library. But just as she reached the exit, the door slammed shut with a loud bang, trapping her inside. She turned around, gasping for air. The man was still standing at the back of the library, his yellow eyes fixed on her. He was no longer moving, but there was something sinister about the way he stood there, like a predator waiting for its prey to make the wrong move. Sarah's mind raced. She had to get out. She had to find a way to escape. She couldn't let him get to her. As she backed away from the door, her eyes landed on the emergency exit at the far end of the room. She ran toward it, her heart pounding in her chest. The door was locked, but she quickly grabbed the handle and pulled, praying it would open. To her relief, the door gave way, and she burst out into the cool night air. She didn't stop running until she reached the main street. She looked back over her shoulder, half expecting to see the man following her, but there was nothing. The street was empty, silent. Sarah didn't know what to make of what had just happened. She didn't understand who that man was or what he wanted, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going back to that library. Not tonight. Not ever again. The next day, Sarah tried to forget about the strange encounter. She told herself it was just a bad dream, or her imagination playing tricks on her. But when she returned to the library the following afternoon, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The door she had escaped through the night before was wide open, and there, lying on the floor, was a small object, a silver pendant, shaped like a crescent moon. Sarah didn't recognize it, but she had a sinking feeling in her gut that it had something to do with the man. She picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling. As soon as she touched it, a cold, heavy feeling washed over her, and she heard a faint whisper in her ear. "You shouldn't have come back." Sarah turned around, expecting to see the man standing behind her, but there was no one there. Room was empty. The pendant felt strangely warm in her hand, like it was alive. She couldn't explain it, but it was almost as if it was calling to her. She had to know more. She had to understand what was going on. She kept the pendant, determined to find out what it meant. But as the days went by, things only got stranger. She couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still watching her, that he was somehow always close by, lurking in the shadows. Every time she walked down the street, she felt his cold presence behind her. And then, one night, just as the clock struck midnight, Sarah received a phone call. When she picked up, the voice on the other end was low, raspy, and unmistakable. "You shouldn't have come back, Sarah." The voice was the man's. She knew it for sure. And in that moment, Sarah realized something terrifying. The man wasn't just a person. He was a spirit, a force of darkness that had been awakened by something she couldn't understand. And now, he was coming for her. From that night on, Sarah never felt safe again. The whispers, the shadows, and the cold hand on her wrist followed her wherever she went. Ashford had become a town trapped in a nightmare, and Sarah was at the center of it all. The library, the pendant, and the man. They were all connected in a way Sarah couldn't escape. And no matter how hard she tried, there was no running from the darkness that had claimed her. This is the story of a small village called Hollowbrook, a place so quiet that even the wind seemed to whisper in hushed tones. But sometimes, when darkness falls, the quiet is broken, and things happen that no one expects. This is the story of one such night, and how a group of friends found themselves caught in a terror they could never have imagined. It all began with an invitation. Lily Summers had lived in Hollowbrook her entire life. She was familiar with every twist and turn of the winding roads, the quiet paths through the woods, and the old creaky houses that lined the streets. But, like many others, she had always felt there was something strange about the village, a lingering feeling that something didn't quite belong. One evening, Lily received a letter, its edges worn and its ink slightly smudged, inviting her to an old farmhouse at the edge of town. The letter was signed by her childhood friend, Ben Walker, who had moved away years ago. He had recently returned, and he was eager to reconnect. He promised Lily that a small group of their old friends would be there, and he assured her it would be a fun reunion. Curious and excited to see Ben after so many years, Lily decided to go. She hadn't seen him in ages, and the thought of rekindling old friendship sounded like a good idea. She gathered her things and set out that night, the full moon hanging brightly in the sky, casting long shadows on the road ahead. When Lily arrived at the farmhouse, she was greeted by Ben, who looked older but still familiar. The house itself was a bit run down, with ivy creeping up the walls and the wooden porch creaking beneath their feet. The air felt colder than it should have been for a late summer evening, but Lily brushed it off as nothing unusual. "Glad you could make it," Ben said, his grin wide and reassuring. "Everyone's inside, waiting for you." Lily smiled back, but she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. She walked inside, where she was greeted by their friends, Emily, Mark, and Simon. They were all there, sitting around a large table in the center of the room. The atmosphere was relaxed at first, with laughter and stories of old times filling the air. But as the evening wore on, something began to change. The laughter faded, and an uncomfortable silence fell over the group. There was something off about the room, a feeling of being watched, of being surrounded by something unseen. Lily couldn't place it, but it made her skin crawl. Ben, noticing the shift in mood, stood up and clapped his hands together. "All right, everyone, let's get to the real reason we're here. I've got something to show you." Curiosity piqued, Lily followed Ben as he led the group out to the back of the farmhouse, where a small shed stood at the edge of the property. It was a strange old building, the kind that looked like it had been abandoned for years, yet there was a strange energy about it. As they approached, Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "Ben, what is this place?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with hesitation. "It's an old family secret," Ben replied, his voice low and almost eager. "You're all about to see something that'll blow your mind." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, unlocking the door to the shed. The door creaked open, revealing a dark interior. The air inside smelled damp and musty, and the faintest sound of scratching could be heard from within. Lily felt her heart race as she stepped forward, unsure of what they were about to find. Ben switched on a light, illuminating a small, dusty room filled with old furniture and strange objects. In the center of the room stood a large wooden box. It was old, the wood dark and weathered, with intricate carvings on its surface. It looked almost ancient, like something out of a forgotten time. The box was locked, but a large rusted key hung from a chain around Ben's neck. "This," Ben said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "is what I've been waiting to show you. This is why I came back to Hollowbrook." Lily felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. She had no idea what was inside the box, but she could feel that it wasn't something meant to be opened. There was something dark about it, something that didn't belong in their world. But Ben, with his eyes wide and excited, didn't seem to feel the same way. He stepped forward and unlocked the box, slowly lifting the lid. The moment the lid opened, a cold gust of wind swept through the shed, Extinguishing the light, the room was plunged into darkness. The scratching sound, louder now, seemed to come from all directions. Everyone stood frozen, the silence heavy and thick, until Ben fumbled for the light switch, his hands trembling. When the light flickered back on, what they saw made their blood run cold. Inside the box was a stone tablet, covered in strange symbols and markings. It wasn't the tablet itself that was so terrifying, but the figure that stood next to it. A tall, shadowy figure, with glowing red eyes. It seemed to be watching them, its form flickering in and out of existence like a wisp of smoke. "Ben, what is that?" Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. Ben stood frozen, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. I don't know. This wasn't supposed to happen." Suddenly the figure moved. It didn't walk, it glided, its form shifting unnaturally. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the lights flickered again. Then, the shadow let out a sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the very walls of the shed. Lily screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the roar of the figure. In an instant it lunged at them. Panic spread like wildfire. The group scattered, running in all directions, but the creature was too fast. It was everywhere at once, its red eyes glowing with an evil hunger. Lily didn't know where to go, but she knew she had to escape. She ran blindly toward the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but the door slammed shut with a force that nearly knocked her off her feet. Behind her, she heard the footsteps of the others, running, shouting, trying to break free. But the creature wasn't finished with them yet. And then, in the chaos, something unexpected happened. The dogs. The old dogs that had always lived in the farmhouse yard, the ones that had been ignored by everyone, suddenly appeared, charging into the shed with a ferocity Lily had never seen before. They were growling, their teeth bared, their eyes fierce. With a strength that surprised everyone, the dogs attacked the creature. They bit, clawed, and tore at it, pulling it away from the group. The creature hissed and shrieked, but the dogs didn't back down. They fought with everything they had, and in the end, it was the dogs who triumphed. The creature disappeared with a final screech, leaving the shed in an eerie silence. Lily stood there, her heart racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The dogs, bloodied but victorious, stood protectively around them, growling at the empty space where the creature had been. Ben collapsed to the ground, his face a mix of relief and horror. I didn't know it would be like this. The group was shaken, their minds racing with questions that would never have answers. But one thing was certain. They had survived. And it was the dogs. Those old, forgotten creatures who had saved them all. And from that night on, Hollowbrook would never be the same again. The dogs, once overlooked, became the guardians of the village, their loyalty unmatched and their courage undeniable.